Chapter 3361. An adult berserk earth-shattering tiger was a very domineering existence. However, this cub had a different kind of cuteness. It didn't have too much might or domineering aura. It only had a little childish voice in its heroic spirit, which made people unable to resist it. Shangguan deep-sea demonic Jiao dragon looked like a mysterious snake. Its body was covered with tiny scales, but it looked very shiny. Under the sunlight, it reflected a bit of dark light. It was not simple. At this moment, the deep-sea demonic Jiao dragon was wrapped around Shangguan arm. It looked very intimate. If it was any other day, Shangguan would definitely feel her scalp go numb when she saw the deep-sea demonic Jiao dragon. However, she had an indescribable feeling of intimacy and joy towards the deep-sea demonic Jiao dragon in front of her. This feeling of being in perfect harmony was like seeing one's closest kin. There was no rejection at all. It felt as if the man and the beast were connected and became a whole. This feeling is really magical. It's clearly my first time seeing it, but it's not just a normal kind of intimacy. Shangguan eyes flashed with amazement. Originally, she was worried about how to get along with this little guy and how to cultivate their relationship. However, after the contract was completed, she felt that all of this was no longer necessary. Even though it was their first time meeting, she felt that they had been together for a long time and understood each other very well. Hearing Shangguan words, Xiren also nodded in agreement. Indeed. I've heard others talk about this feeling before. Now that I've experienced it myself, I truly feel how magical this feeling is. Di Baichen's handsome face revealed a joyful and gentle smile. The little guy in his arms really had a different kind of cuteness. Back then, Baishe was also like this when it stuck to Bailey Hongzhuang's arms all day long. They've just been born. I'm afraid they're still a little unfamiliar with the outside world. You should accompany them for the next 2 days. Bailey Hongzhuang was full of smiles. These little guys were usually sealed not long after they were born. In addition, the first person they saw was their master. Therefore, they had the feeling that their master was their parent. When they were just born, they were the most clingy. However, demonic beasts always had the nature of demonic beasts. As long as they were familiar with the environment, their courage would also show. Hearing this, Di Baichen and the other two nodded with a smile. Presumably, having these little fellows by their side in the future would be a different experience. In my opinion, you don't have to keep them in your contract space anymore. Just keep them in your chaos ring. The chaos ring's range of activity is very large. White Lion, Xiao He, and Xiao Bai can also help to look after it and cultivate their friendship at the same time. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze landed on Baishe, Xiao He, and Xiao Bai. Her exquisite and beautiful face flashed with an elegant smile. Since they were on such good terms, it was only natural for their contracted beasts to be on good terms with each other as well. It just so happened that Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and White Lion were usually busy bickering. It was undoubtedly the best choice to leave the 3 little fellows in their care. This could be considered as giving them something to do. Chapter 3362. Currently, they were in troubled times in the Penglai Palace. There were many troublesome matters and it would not be convenient for them to split their attention to take care of the 3 little ones. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had 3 extremely powerful contract beasts. It was more than appropriate to give them the contract beasts. Not bad, not bad. It just so happens that Xiao He and Xiao Bai don't have much to do. This nanny mission is very suitable for them. Shangguan was full of smiles. She could not bear to let her contract beasts suffer with her as soon as they were born. Who knew if they would be in big trouble if they went out now? Baishe, Xiao He, and Xiao Bai could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang with a bitter expression. Master, nannies don't seem to be suitable for us, right? You haven't done it before. How do you know it's not suitable for you? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. I think this kind of thing is very suitable for you. You are all contract beasts. It should be easy for you to get along. Moreover, Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and how Baisher grew up, don't you know very well? The three beasts were collectively speechless. So it was useless no matter what they said now. I think this suggestion is very good. It's decided then. In the end, Di Beichen directly made the decision, leaving the three beasts with no chance to refute. After Di Beichen and the other two completed the contract, they appeared in front of Long Yanwei together. Long Yanwei looked at the little ones in Di Beichen and the other two's arms and could not help but smile. It seems that these three little ones are very satisfied with you. Thank you, Master Long. These contract beasts are really in line with what we have in mind. Di Beichen and the other two could not help but speak up. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. It is also my wish to be able to help these little ones find suitable masters. Now that I look at these three little ones, I can't help but think of the scene when they were sealed. Almost every time he tried to snatch a demonic beast's cub, he would be hunted down by the parents of the demonic beasts. It was not easy to successfully snatch a demonic beast's cub. Actually, the process of snatching the cubs of the demonic beasts was not very pleasant. On the contrary, there was a trace of guilt. However, every time he saw the intimacy between the cubs and the cultivators, he would feel much better. He didn't want to ruin the future of the demonic beasts because of this. Instead, he wanted to give them a different kind of life. He only hoped that they would feel that it was very good. Yi Zihua nodded slightly. He understood Long Yanwei's feelings. Almost every time Long Yanwei went out to look for young demonic beasts, he would call him along. Therefore, he understood the process very well. Among the people present, other than Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei, there was another person who understood this feeling very well. This person was Bailey Hongzhuang. She was also a sealing master, but she didn't focus on sealing. She chose to learn sealing techniques because she wanted to help herself. Since the contract has been completed, we will take our leave first. Di Beichen said slowly. There was nothing else for them to do if they continued to stay here. It was better not to disturb Long Yanwei and Bailey Hongzhuang. At this time, Yi Zihua's voice also sounded. I'm afraid that you will be in a lot of trouble if you go out now. Do you want me to send someone to help you solve this problem? Chapter 3363. Just by thinking about it, Yi Zihua could guess what kind of situation they would encounter when they went out. Penglai Palace originally encouraged the cultivators to learn from each other. As long as there was a conflict, there was no need to endure it at all. They could just attack directly. This kind of robbery was naturally within the permitted scope. Even if Di Beichen and the other two had already completed the contract and it was impossible for the other cultivators to rob them, it was still very simple to trigger a battle. What Long Yanwei did this time was really crazy, so this battle would probably be unprecedentedly fierce. Hearing Yi Zihua's proposal, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at each other and finally chose to refuse. Master Yi, thank you for your kindness, but since this matter was caused by us, we will use our own means to solve it. As long as Master Yi spoke, the other cultivators would naturally not dare to do anything to them. However, this way, their reputation of not having true ability would be even more firmly pinned. They had already decided that they could no longer implicate Long Yanwei, so naturally, they could no longer be under the protection of Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua. They would have to face what they had to face sooner or later. If they were to shrink back now, their lives in the outer palace would be difficult in the future. Instead of being scolded as cowards, they might as well fight like this. No matter what the final result was, at least it would prove their true ability. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's answer was obviously beyond Yi Zihua's expectations. The current situation was very troublesome even for him. It was undoubtedly best for him to come forward and settle this conflict. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to unanimously choose to refuse. Although it was somewhat difficult to understand in his heart, Yi Zihua had to admit that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's decision made him admire them more. Cultivators should have such a backbone. Although there were many troubles, as long as these troubles were solved one by one, the achievements after overcoming all obstacles would definitely not be comparable to ordinary people. Are you sure? Long Yanwei could not help but ask, with your current ability, it is very troublesome to face this. As the saying goes, 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Don't be too impulsive. Hearing the concern in Long Yanwei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but feel touched. At the same time, the thoughts in their hearts became even more resolute. Long Yanwei had already done so much for them. How could they let Long Yanwei continue to worry about them? If this continued, then the four of them would really become cripples. Thank you for your concern. We'll think of a way to deal with it ourselves. Di Beichen and the other three insisted on their own way of thinking. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had already made up their minds, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua did not say anything more. It was likely that they already had their own plans in their hearts. Then be careful. If there's anything you need our help with, don't mind it. Just tell us directly, Long Yanwei said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three bowed and thanked Long Yanwei again before leaving his residence. After leaving Long Yanwei's residence, the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were once again covered with a grave expression. They were the ones who said it was bad, and now they were the ones who said it wasn't so bad. What exactly was the situation in front of them? If we go out now, a battle is indeed unavoidable. However, there are still people in charge of the outer palace. When the commotion reaches a certain level, it will be time for them to step in. Chapter 3365. What's the difference between asking Master Long and Master Yi for help if the manager shows up? Isn't it the same? Shangguan Yingying asked doubtfully. When Ziren stretched out a finger and shook it, saying, these two are completely different. In the former, we relied on our own strength to solve this problem. It was just that the manager saw that the commotion was too big and chose to take action. We didn't take the initiative to ask for help. In the latter, we asked for help, which means that we don't have the ability. The two may seem to have the same ending, but the meaning is completely different. That's not all. In this way, we can be considered to have struck back head-on. Those fellows can no longer label us as cowards. If anyone wants to find trouble with us in the future, they'll have to think twice. Di Beichen's deep and bright eyes flashed with a deep light. Although they were only newcomers, he believed that their strength was not at the bottom of the outer hall. If they were to really fight, the strength they would erupt with would absolutely shock everyone. Shangguan Yingying, who didn't understand at first, finally understood. So that's your plan. So we're not going to challenge all the outer hall disciples. You guys really scared me to death. I thought you guys had gone crazy because of your brain damage. As Shangguan Yingying's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but laugh. If we can defeat all the outer hall disciples, then we'll really be geniuses. Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but blush when she was teased by Ziren and the others. She said awkwardly, don't make fun of me. Isn't it because you guys didn't explain clearly that I misunderstood? Although we can expect the manager to appear, we don't know how big the commotion will be. So this battle isn't optimistic. I'm afraid we'll have to suffer a lot. Ziren glanced at Shangguan Yingying, as if to let her be mentally prepared. Looking at Ziren's serious look, Shangguan Yingying stopped joking and immediately nodded. I understand. Yingying, if someone comes looking for trouble when we go out later, you don't have to be polite. Just scold whoever is unhappy. Anyway, we're definitely going to make a scene today. The corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly. After deciding to make a scene, she simply threw all her scruples aside. Since she wanted to make a scene, then she might as well make it bigger. Shangguan Ying's eyes lit up. Really? Di Beichen nodded. These guys scolded us so happily before. I'm afraid they thought we didn't dare to do anything. Now, look at who's scolding us the most. You can start with them. Kill the chicken to warn the monkey. I hope that our cooperation today can achieve a good result. Xiren straightened his robe, and a playful smile appeared on his gentle and elegant face. I didn't expect that we would have to make a big scene as soon as we arrived at Penglai Palace. The blood in my body has begun to boil. Bai Shi, Xiao He, and Xiao Bai could not help but run out. They hurriedly said, "Our blood is boiling." The 4 people and 3 beasts looked at each other and smiled. A determined light appeared in their eyes. They were already prepared for the upcoming bloody battle. After making the decision, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not stay any longer. They immediately walked out. Chapter 3366. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 left, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua, who were in the room, also revealed a curious expression. Yanwei, how do you think these 4 little fellows will deal with this matter? In my opinion, I'm afraid they're planning to cause trouble when they go out now. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, Yi Zihua couldn't help but laugh. I feel that these 4 little fellows are getting more and more interesting. I'm looking forward to how much trouble they can cause. We've seen their fighting strength last time. If they really cause trouble, I reckon that the movements of these fellows won't be small. Even though Long Yanwei had already expected that the commotion caused by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 wouldn't be small, they never thought that the commotion would be so big. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 gradually returned to the residential area of the Outer Palace disciples with the conviction of facing death with equanimity. The moment they stepped into the residential area, they already felt countless covetous gazes falling on them. This kind of gaze was filled with aggression, as if they were treating Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 as their targets. These 4 fellows have returned from Master Long's place. I presume that the demon pet egg has already fallen into their hands. That's right, Master Long's subordinate said that Master Long and Master Yi left together to choose the demon pet egg, but that guy has already been kicked out of the Penglai Palace. So to say, as long as we rob them, the demon pet egg will fall into our hands. The eyes of the Outer Palace disciples flashed with excitement. Thinking about being able to obtain the demon pet egg, they couldn't help but be excited. This discussion naturally fell into the ears of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Only then did they know that Master Long had already chased away the subordinate who leaked the news, and they couldn't help but feel a little more comforted in their hearts. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only felt that with every step they took, there was a trace of danger. In fact, they were very clear in their hearts that the reason why these fellows hadn't made a move yet wasn't because they were afraid of them, but because they were afraid of the other Outer Palace disciples present. There were only 3 demon pet eggs in total. If someone came up to deal with them first, the other cultivators would very likely be the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind, so no one dared to act rashly. Of course, this situation did not last long before it was broken. Yo, cowards! Have you returned from Master Long's place? Is Lord Long having a good time? At this moment, a burly fatty walked out and blocked the path of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Looking at the fat man's face, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only felt that he was an eyesore. Shangguan Yingying narrowed her eyes. She remembered this guy. Many of those unpleasant words and guesses came from this fatty. Damn fatty, what does it have to do with you? If you continue to be long-winded, do you believe that I will kill you? Shangguan Yingying opened her mouth and spoke in a domineering tone. The Outer Palace disciples present couldn't help but gasp when they heard Shangguan Yingying's words. This fatty was at the 7th level of the Purple Realm. Among the Outer Palace disciples, his cultivation was considered quite strong. Chapter 3367. Not only the cultivators present, but even Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two were stunned when they heard Shangguan Yingying's words. They had already guessed that the hot-tempered Shangguan Yingying would not be polite with her words, but they did not expect her to be so straightforward and domineering. Shangguan Yingying was happy when she knew that she could explode at will. She had been holding back her anger for a long time. Since she did not need to care about anything now, she would naturally find something to say. After all, they would have to fight in the end, right? Fatty was dumbfounded when he heard Shangguan Yingying's words. He had been mocking Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three since the beginning. The four of them had been swallowing their anger and did not dare to talk back. He was very satisfied with this. It was a good opportunity to show his strength. However, Shangguan Yingying dared to say that she wanted to kill him. Kill me? Fatty frowned coldly. He pointed at himself and then at Shangguan Yingying. Who do you think you are? You don't need to care who I am. However, I only know one thing. A good dog does not block the way. Shangguan Yingying looked at Fatty coldly. The more she looked at Fatty, the more unhappy she was. Cultivators put their mind on cultivation every day. She did not know how Fatty got so fat. He was really an eyesore. You dare to call me a dog? Fatty widened his eyes. He had been in the outer hall for so long and no cultivator had dared to call him that. Shangguan Yingying smiled. You said it yourself. I think you want to die, right? Anger surged into Fatty's heart, and his eyes became increasingly sharp. A faint murderous aura had already spread out. I think you want to die more, right? Di Beichen said coldly. His cold and sharp eyes looked directly at Fatty. The coldness in his eyes was enough to freeze people. The fat man, who had already wanted to attack, couldn't help but quiver after seeing Di Beichen's gaze. He couldn't understand it in his heart. He had been in Penglai Island for so long, how could his murderous aura not be comparable to a newcomer who had just arrived? When the disciples who had been waiting to watch the show saw the completely different attitude of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, their expressions became interesting. Why did these four fellows suddenly change their personalities? Wasn't there no response no matter how much he insulted her before? This is a direct provocation. I don't know what's wrong with them. Could it be that they received some news from Master Long, or are they under Master Long's protection, so they don't care at all? He's just a newcomer who just came to the outer palace, yet he's already so arrogant and independent. If he's not taught a lesson, he'll probably become even more lawless in the future. So what if he has Master Long's protection? These people don't know their limits. As long as they take the initiative to attack, then all of this naturally has nothing to do with us. If we accidentally kill them, the things in the Qiankuan bag will naturally belong to the winner. The outer hall disciples were discussing animatedly. Suddenly, their faces were filled with interest. Everyone was full of expectations for the Qiankuan bag of these four fellows. Especially the demon pet egg. It was really a treasure that couldn't be compared to anything. He punched out with his right fist, aiming directly at Xiren's face. The more he looked at this fellow, the more annoyed he felt. He wanted to take this fellow's life first. Xiren was already prepared to defend himself. When the fatty's fist appeared, he dodged to the side and dodged the fatty's attack. At the same time, his fist also attacked. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others secretly praised Xiren in their hearts. In that case, the fatty was the one who made the first move, and the responsibility fell entirely on the fatty's shoulders. It had nothing to do with them at all. Chapter 3369. The three cultivators also felt that something was amiss. No matter what, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were all people that Master Long had recruited. Before this, they had clearly discussed how to force Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to make the first move. That way, they wouldn't have to worry about Master Long's reprimand. However, they didn't expect that instead of angering Bailey Hongzhuang to death, it was Wen Ziren who had angered the fatty. Being ugly had always been the fatty's sore point. After all, there weren't many cultivators who still looked the same after reaching such a cultivation level. Now that Ziren had mercilessly scolded him, coupled with the mockery of the surrounding crowd, it was normal for the fatty to not be able to take it. Now, they could only say that they had failed at the first step. However, as long as they could kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, all of these problems wouldn't exist. Seeing that their opponents had come forward together, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at each other and immediately faced their respective opponents. As their opponents' auras completely exploded, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were clearly aware of their cultivations. 1 Purple Realm 7th level, 2 Purple Realm 6th level, and 1 Purple Realm 5th level. Looking at this formation, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but laugh coldly in their hearts. As long as no Purple Realm 8th level cultivator appeared, the other cultivators wouldn't be able to pose a huge threat to them. Di Beichen stood in front of the fatty without hesitation. Even though the fatty wanted to kill Ziren, he could only narrow his eyes when he saw Di Beichen standing in front of him. Since you want to die first, I'll fulfill your wish. The fatty's eyes were filled with a cold and ruthless light. He hadn't been so angry in a long time. Hee, Di Beichen laughed coldly, the contempt and disdain in his eyes were extremely thick. He was only at the 7th level of the Purple Realm, yet he dared to be so arrogant in front of him. It seemed that if he didn't give him a resounding slap, he wouldn't know how much he was worth. Bailey Hongzhuang and Wen Ziren were up against 2 Purple Realm level 6 practitioners. Shangguan Yingying stood in front of the Purple Realm level 5 practitioner, her heart leaping with joy. Now it all depended on her performance. Even though they had just arrived at Penglai Island not long ago, their ability to fight beyond their level had never disappeared. Usually, as long as their opponent was not an exceptionally powerful practitioner of the same level, ordinary practitioners of the same level would not be their opponent at all. The battle broke out in an instant. Bailey Hongzhuang locked her eyes on the skinny dwarf in front of her. She had to admit that birds of a feather flocked together. Fatty's friends didn't look good at all. At the very least, the guy in front of her was not as tall as her. He looked like a mouse, a bit slippery, but without any aura. Beauty, I heard that your name is Bailey Hongzhuang. The man's eyes revealed a wretched light. As long as you give me the demon pet egg, I'll let you go. How about it? Your skin is so soft and tender, I really can't bear to lay my hands on you. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips hooked up into a sneer. You can't bear to lay your hands on me, but I can. After saying that, Bailey Hongzhuang was too lazy to talk nonsense with this man. Her fist directly stretched out and attacked the opponent's neck without hesitation. Today, not only did they come to cause trouble, they also came to prove their ability. So this battle would not drag on. Chapter 3370. Although he did not think that a few newcomers to Penglai Island could be that powerful, since he had already made his move, he naturally would not diminish his own prestige. If Bailey Hongzhuang was unwilling to submit, then he could only use his own strength to make Bailey Hongzhuang submit. Bang! The moment their fists collided, the man's expression changed completely. Too powerful. Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was simply too powerful. Crack. The crowd could even hear the slight sound of bones cracking. The shorty immediately retracted his fist. The intense pain from his fist made him not dare to fight Bailey Hongzhuang head-on. With such a difference in strength, if he fought head-on, he would be the one at a disadvantage. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not intend to give him any time to think. With a flash of her body, she immediately appeared beside the cultivator. At the same time, a torrential storm of attacks landed mercilessly on the cultivator's body. Bang bang bang. The shorty kept dodging, but his dodging speed was not as fast as Bailey Hongzhuang's. Shadow shifting technique was a movement technique that Bailey Hongzhuang was proud of in her previous life. Now, she had already mastered shadow shifting technique. If the cultivator was not proficient in speed, they would not be able to keep up with her speed. What happened next was beyond everyone's expectations. This was because the Purple Realm level 6 shorty had become Bailey Hongzhuang's target. In terms of speed, he could not dodge Bailey Hongzhuang. In terms of strength, he could not defeat Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, he could only become a dodging target. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's every attack landed squarely on his body. Bang bang bang. The strong and fierce power brought with it a sharp gust of wind. Bailey Hongzhuang did not intend to give her opponent any chance to retaliate. Since she had already made her move, she would use the simplest method to completely eliminate her opponent. In the eyes of the crowd, the short man's body was shaking like a sieve. At the same time, they could also see the blooming of blood. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression couldn't help but change. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang's strength to be so powerful. A Purple Realm 6th level cultivator was being chased and beaten by a Purple Realm 5th level cultivator, and he didn't even have a chance to retaliate. This was a little too exaggerated. Unfortunately, all of this was happening right in front of them. Even if they didn't want to believe it, it still happened. Bang! Bailey Hongzhuang threw out another punch. The short man could no longer withstand such a fierce attack. His body flew out and landed heavily on the ground. The man's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang was no longer filled with the contempt from before. Instead, it was filled with deep fear and terror. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so powerful. Even though he knew that the Purple Realm 8th level Gao Hanchun had died at the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he always thought that it was because of the poison used by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He never thought that they would have such strength. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, the man's aura instantly withered. He only felt a sharp pain in his internal organs, as if they had been displaced. In the next second, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked in front of the man. Her beautiful face was filled with coldness and frost, revealing a distant coldness and the indifference of the Grim Reaper. Chapter 3371. You, what are you trying to do? At this moment, the man no longer dared to underestimate Bailey Hongzhuang. This extremely beautiful woman's attacks were not just any ordinary kind of ruthless. Just the wounds on his body alone would take a very long time to heal. On the surface, it looked like he had only suffered some external injuries, but in reality, the severity of his internal injuries had far exceeded anyone's expectations. Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips curled into a sexy yet languid angle. Her cold and emotionless eyes swept across the crowd. When the crowd noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze, they felt an inexplicable chill. I've heard that the outer palace doesn't forbid killing. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the man's face instantly drained of color. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such an idea. You. The man was now in a complete panic. He stared at Bailey Hongzhuang as if he wanted to say something but realized that he had no idea what to say. The cultivators in the crowd all turned their gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Their eyes were filled with suspicion. The outer palace did indeed allow for battles and it did not exclude the possibility of death. However, Bailey Hongzhuang has only been in the outer palace for a few days. They found it hard to believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such courage. You want to kill me? The man stared fixedly at Bailey Hongzhuang, clearly unable to believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would do such a thing. In the next second, Bailey Hongzhuang's smile widened. Since killing is not forbidden, why should I allow an eyesore like you to remain in the outer palace? Her voice fell, and before anyone could react, Bailey Hongzhuang's Luli sword had already pierced the man's chest without hesitation. Pfft! The man spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were still fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang in disbelief. Up until the moment of his death, he still could not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would kill him so cleanly. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm and cold. Since they were here to cause trouble anyway, the bigger the situation, the better. Now, the outer palace disciples were eyeing them covetously and thought that they were sheep that could be easily bullied. Since it was impossible for them to live in harmony with everyone, they might as well display their powers so that the other party would not dare to cause any more trouble. If they wanted to survive in the outer palace, they would first need to build a good relationship with everyone. Second, they would need to instill fear them. Now, the only thing they could do was the second option, so they had to show their ruthless side. Faced with such a Bailey Hongzhuang, the crowd was dumbfounded. From the beginning to the end, Bailey Hongzhuang and Shorty had only exchanged blows for a short period of time. At this moment, Shorty had completely disappeared from this world. None of them would have thought that this extremely beautiful and otherworldly woman in front of them would act so decisively. She did not hesitate to take someone's life. Her coldness and indifference reminded them of the beautiful Azura. While Bailey Hongzhuang was fighting, Shangguan Yingying's speed was even faster. Her opponent was only a 5th-level Purple Realm cultivator. She had completely crushed him with brute force. She remembered clearly how unpleasant the words these fellows had said. After living for so many years, she had never been insulted by such vulgar words. Chapter 3372. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang's indifference and decisiveness, Shangguan Yingying's violence also made everyone's heart turn cold. Because, she directly stepped on the other party's mouth until it burst. The reason was that the other party spoke rudely and the words he said were extremely unpleasant, so when she sent him to hell, she didn't give him the slightest chance to speak. Everyone had seen many ways to die, but they had never seen such a strange way to die. Looking at the completely distorted face, everyone couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. These two women were both first-class beauties, but who would have thought that the degree of ruthlessness was not inferior to their looks at all? Poisonous beauties, everyone couldn't help but think of this phrase in their minds. Previously, there were many people who had thoughts about Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying, but now it seemed that this wasn't an easy matter. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause them to lose their little lives. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying dealt with their opponents, they stood in the same place. They didn't have the slightest intention to help Di Beichen and Wen Ziren. Because, they believed that Di Beichen and Wen Ziren would also quickly finish this battle. When the fatty saw his two companions die in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying's strength would be so strong, and the speed at which they finished the battle was so fast. Originally, he thought that he could easily kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. As long as he obtained the demon pet egg, then he would be different from before. However, the reality was so cruel. His two companions were finished off just like that, and he was clearly at the 7th level of the Purple Realm, but against Di Beichen, he couldn't gain the slightest advantage. In this kind of battle, every moment he lasted was another moment of face slapping. If this spread out, if people didn't think that Di Beichen was too strong, then they would think that he was too weak. This wasn't an ordinary loss of face. Bang! Bang! When Di Beichen and Wen Ziren saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying had finished their battle, they also sped up and finished off their opponents with lightning speed. After dealing with his opponent, Ziren clapped his hands and a faint smile appeared on his cultured and refined face. Now, I can finally have some peace and quiet. Hearing Ziren's words, the surrounding crowd's expression couldn't help but change. It had to be said that when Ziren's elegant demeanor didn't match his words at all. To be so arrogant without any strength, this kind of person should have gone to hell long ago. Di Beichen's expression was cold as he stepped on the fatty's body. The disdain and coldness in his eyes became more and more obvious. Just with this level of strength, he wanted to snatch their demon pet eggs. It was a bit too laughable. I thought these guys knew us very well. I didn't expect them to not know us at all. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. When they came out of the house, they had heard all kinds of discussions. All of this proved that during this period of time, everyone had already investigated their identities and backgrounds thoroughly. Logically speaking, everyone should have some understanding of their battle with Gao Hanchun. They didn't think that the other party would dare to find trouble with them with just this kind of formation. In fact, everyone had indeed investigated the battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and Gao Hanchun. However, no one believed that they, who were only at the 5th level of the Purple Realm, could defeat Gao Hanchun. Chapter 3373. After dealing with the 4 fellows, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others quietly swept their gazes across the crowd. Many cultivators turned their gazes away when they noticed their gazes. They were secretly assessing the true power of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Fatty Heart and the other 3 were considered to be quite powerful among them. Now that they had been dealt with so easily, it was clear that it would not be an easy task for them to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. If they were to charge forward recklessly, they would most likely end up like Fatty Heart and the other 3. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had used their actions to prove their character. If anyone were to charge forward, it would either be their death or their own. No matter who it was, it had not been easy for them to reach this point. No one wanted to throw away their little lives here, so they had to think carefully. In an instant, the surrounding cultivators quieted down. Their gazes constantly scanned their surroundings, wondering who would make the next move. However, everyone clearly had the same idea, so no one dared to continue to cause trouble for the time being. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 looked at each other. It seems that their move of killing the chicken to warn the monkey had a certain degree of effect. After killing 4 people, these fellows no longer dared to act blindly without thinking. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 continued their journey towards the 5th building. It would be best if these fellows did not continue to cause trouble. However, if they insisted on causing trouble, they would have no choice but to fight to the end. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 continue their journey, the crowd could not help but follow closely behind them, anticipating who would make the next move. This was the first time a scene like this had happened in the entire Outer Palace. As Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 drew closer to the 5th building, the crowd of Outer Palace disciples could not help but grow anxious. Once Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 returned to the building and completed the contract, it would be too late for them to do anything else. Why isn't anyone making a move? If they don't make a move now, it'll all be too late. I didn't expect the strength of these 4 fellows to be so strong. There may not be many people who are their opponents in a one-on-one fight, but as long as we attack together, the 4 of them will only die. Don't hesitate anymore. If you continue like this, you won't be able to get any benefits. Some of the disciples who weren't strong enough and wanted to get the demon pet eggs were already anxious. This was such a great opportunity. If they missed it, they didn't know when they would be able to get the demon pet eggs in the future. The other cultivators looked at each other in dismay. Thousands of thoughts ran through their minds. If they missed this opportunity, they would not have another chance. Everyone's emotions were complicated to the extreme. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were also paying attention to the changes in everyone's emotions. These fellows still haven't shown any signs of making a move. Don't tell me they're going to settle this just like that. Shangguaning Ying's eyes were filled with surprise. She was prepared to fight to the death, but she didn't expect everyone to stop now. It's not certain yet, unless it's until we enter the building. Bailey Hongzhuang transmitted, however, I feel that all of this won't be completed so smoothly. The closer the distance, the greater the danger. Chapter 3374. No matter who it is, there will always be some kind of wishful thinking, hoping that they can get the greatest benefits without any effort. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind, reaping the benefits of the fisherman. This is what everyone is most willing to do on a daily basis. Until the last step, no one is willing to be the first bird, but when it really comes to the last step, everyone can only take the risk. Therefore, although no one wants to make a move on them now, this doesn't mean that this problem is solved just like that. If all of this was really so easy to solve, then Master Yi wouldn't have taken the initiative to help them solve this problem. Ying, you have to be mentally prepared. Next is a group battle. Wen Xiren chuckled. This kind of group battle, he really didn't participate in it. He didn't expect that he would become the target of everyone's siege as soon as he arrived at Penglai Palace. At the same time, he was also a little excited. Through this competition, he can also test what level his strength has reached. Shangguaniying nodded her head lightly, her eyes filled with determination and interest. Let's fight, I've never been afraid of fighting since I was young. Hearing Shangguaniying's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two chuckled in their hearts. They really believe these words. Every time Shangguaniying makes a move, they can feel the violence in her bones. Thinking about it, not letting her make a move is what makes her feel the most uncomfortable. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were getting closer and closer to building number 5, some cultivators finally couldn't hold it in anymore. For the demon pet egg, everyone, let's go together. A disciple took the lead and shouted. With his strength alone, it was naturally impossible to win. At this point, they could only gang up. No matter what the process is, as long as they can snatch this demon pet egg, it's fine. As the disciple's voice fell, the atmosphere suddenly changed. All the disciples looked at each other, and the desire in their eyes couldn't be more obvious. Do it. Everyone also knew that if they didn't make a move now, they wouldn't have a chance. Immediately, there were cultivators rushing towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. After someone took the lead, the rest of the cultivators began to move as well. Regardless of whose hands this demon pet egg ended up in, they had to at least get this demon pet egg out of the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. In just a short moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were surrounded by the crowd. Di Beichen, as long as you hand over the demon pet egg, we can let you live. A disciple took the lead and said, his gaze locked onto them. The strength displayed by Di Beichen's group of 4 was not weak. If they could directly obtain the demon pet egg, then they would be able to reduce some of the trouble. That's right. With just the strength of the 4 of you, it's impossible for you to be a match for us. Newcomers should keep a low profile here. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for showing off too much. The demon pet egg is not something that newcomers like you can touch. As long as you hand over the demon pet egg, you can still safely stay in the outer palace. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three found it funny when they heard the words, showing off too much. Chapter 3375. If I were to hand over the demon pet egg, there wouldn't be enough for so many of you, right? The corner of Di Beichen's mouth curled up into a sneer. He looked at the disciple in front of him who was threatening him to hand over the demon pet egg and mocked. Hearing this, the disciple was also stunned for a moment. He said, you don't need to care about this matter. You just need to hand over the demon pet egg first. The other disciples only surrounded Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. They didn't make any moves. In fact, they had already made a decision in their hearts. Regardless of whether Di Beichen and the other two obediently handed over the demon pet egg or not, they had to deal with these 4 fellows. After all, they were cultivators that Master Long had recruited. If Master Long were to make a fuss about it, no matter who obtained the demon pet egg, it would inevitably cause quite a bit of trouble. Only by cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots, even if Master Long was furious, he wouldn't severely punish them for the 4 dead people. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had long seen through the other party's trick. In fact, they didn't play this kind of trick on a daily basis. If someone were to naively hand over the item, then that would be truly stupid. You guys don't have to fantasize anymore. The demon pet egg has already been contracted by us. You guys can't get anything. Shang Guanyin coldly said. These guys in front of her didn't seem to be ordinary annoying. She might as well break everyone's fantasies like this. Following Shang Guanying's words, the cultivators present couldn't help but be stunned. Thick astonishment flashed across their faces. However, they were quickly refuted by the other cultivators. This is impossible. You don't need to tell such a clumsy lie to deceive us. What's impossible about that? Shang Guanying raised her eyebrows. We are very clear about what you guys are planning. How could you possibly bring the demon pet egg out? The cultivators present looked at each other. For a moment, no one was able to determine whether what Shang Guanying said was true or false. Why do you care so much? As long as the four of them die, wouldn't we be clear? Are you sure you don't want to hand over the demon pet egg? You're the unlucky ones. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. The murderous intent in their eyes gradually thickened. They no longer had the mood to continue wasting time like this. Those who want our things are almost all dead. Di Beichen's lips curled into a cold smile as he responded to the other party's threat with a counterthreat. As soon as he said that, the expressions of all the cultivators present changed. Rage immediately surged onto their faces. Don't be courteous with them, just attack. In a split second, vigorous elemental energy exploded in the outer hall. All the cultivators began to surround and attack Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. If it were any other cultivator, they would have panicked when facing so many cultivators. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three weren't that afraid. Because during this period of time in the oceanic world, they had been facing such a situation. No matter how many cultivators were besieging them, they only needed to face the few cultivators in front of them. As for how long they could hold on, that would depend on their strength. Chapter 3376. With so many cultivators channeling their elemental energy at the same time, the commotion was extremely shocking. Xiao He and Xiao Bai had already appeared beside Bailey Hongzhuang. With their bodies shrunk, it was difficult for them to be noticed by other cultivators. In a group battle like this, it was undoubtedly very effective. Bai Shi did not appear together with them because they were already surrounded. The number of cultivators that the four of them faced was the same as the number of cultivators that each of them faced after Bai Shi appeared. It was impossible for them to kill so many cultivators at once. Hence, they had to hold on for a long enough time. This kind of tag team battle was very taxing on the cultivators. Even if they had some confidence in their endurance, they knew that they could not hold on forever. Even if Bai Shi appeared a little later, he could still help them withstand a certain amount of pressure and buy them some time to catch their breath. Master, are we going to take their lives or what? Xiao He could not help but ask. Once it joined forces with Xiao Bai to launch a sneak attack, the effect would be very obvious. Hence, they had to be clear about the limits of their attack. Just take care of them. Bailey Hongzhuang said without hesitation. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a ruthless light. These outer palace disciples in front of them clearly intended to take their lives. Since that was the case, there was no need for them to show any mercy. Furthermore, they were currently being ganged up on. If they took their opponents' lives, it meant that they would have to continue this tag team battle. This was extremely disadvantageous to them. If they wanted to resolve this situation, they could only take their opponents' lives directly. They believed that when more and more cultivators died, these people would be more cautious. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiao He and Xiao Bai also nodded. If they had to be careful when they attacked, it would be troublesome for them to move. Since they did not have to worry about anything now, they could go all out. The battle erupted in an instant. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's elemental energy surged to the extreme. Before they could make a move, the others' attacks had already struck towards them. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three reacted extremely quickly and quickly began to face the enemy. Bang bang bang. The sound of fists colliding continuously spread out as yuan power ripples continuously spread out. Both parties were extremely ruthless in their attacks, unwilling to give the other party even the slightest chance to breathe. In the course of this battle, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's movements were nimble and quick. Even though there were many people attacking them, they were still able to deal with them without panicking. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to their experience in the oceanic world. Thinking back to when they were besieged by monster beasts in the oceanic world, they were also flustered. However, as they gradually gained more experience, they became more proficient in dealing with group attacks. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's orderly attacks, the cultivators who were attacking in groups were clearly a little messy. They were not partners in the first place. At this moment, they were only working together for the same goal. All of their attacks were launched at the same time. Some of them landed on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's bodies, while some landed on the other cultivators. Chapter 3377. This scene was obviously something that no one had expected. It was just that when they were attacking, they were accidentally affected by other cultivators. Naturally, it was inevitable that they would be a little angry. Then, those with bad tempers directly began to retaliate. Unknowingly, some cultivators had already begun to fight among themselves. Regarding this point, everyone felt speechless for a while. However, the goal of the vast majority of cultivators was still Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. The monster pet egg was what they wanted wholeheartedly. Bang! 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 The sound of elemental energy colliding constantly resounded. Cracks had already appeared on the flat ground in the midst of everyone's battle. Fortunately, the road in Penglai Palace was wide enough. Otherwise, the buildings on the side would have been affected by their battle and turned into ruins. Elemental energy constantly poured out from Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Now, they could be said to be conserving every bit of elemental energy. Only by preserving a little bit of elemental energy could they hold on for a while longer. Bailey Hongzhuang had already prepared the elixir supply. In the face of such a battle of attrition, elemental energy consumption was the fastest, so replenishing elemental energy was the most important. As soon as they attacked, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three tried their best to finish off the other party. Otherwise, they would have to spend more energy in elemental energy. Fortunately, the cultivation of the vast majority of cultivators was only at Purple Realm Level 5 and Purple Realm Level 6. Everyone was also a cultivator who had not been in Penglai Palace for a long time. In addition, it was not so easy to break through at this level. Even with the cultivation resources of Penglai Palace, the spirit stones in everyone's hands were still not enough for cultivation. Therefore, this speed was relatively stagnant. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's efficiency was not bad. The cultivators in front of them fell one by one in front of them, completely disappearing from this world. However, compared to their speed of elimination, Xiao He and Xiao Bai were the fastest. Their sneak attacks often caught the cultivators off guard. Moreover, they directly attacked the opponent's weakest point as soon as they attacked, not giving the opponent the slightest chance to fight back. Many cultivators directly fell into their path like this. Even until death, they did not understand how they died. The other cultivators gradually realized that some cultivators had lost their lives after letting out a scream. They did not notice what had happened at all. No, something else is ambushing us. One of the cultivators had a grave expression on his face, revealing some panic and fear. Apart from Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, there was clearly no one else present. However, many of them had clearly been ambushed. Hearing this cultivator's words, the other cultivators' expressions changed as they nodded. That's right. There is indeed something invisible attacking us. Everyone, be careful. What kind of sorcery did they use? For a moment, the way everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three changed completely. If they could see it, they could still defend against it. However, this feeling of being invisible and untouchable made everyone panic and their hair stand on end. Seeing that everyone had mistaken Xiao He and Xiao Bai's sneak attacks as sorcery, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three found it funny. These guys were really too stupid to think of such a reason. Chapter 3378. It had to be said that Xiao He and Xiao Bai's ability to change their figures at will was a great weapon for a sneak attack. Especially in this chaotic battle, everyone was focused on fighting, and the surrounding environment was even more noisy. No one would notice that two things the size of stones could actually threaten their lives. From another perspective, if it was Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three who encountered such a sneak attack, they would probably feel that it was very scary. Hearing Shangguaning Ying's words, everyone was even more uncertain. They clearly knew that Shangguaning Ying's words were mocking them, but the situation in front of them really made them think this way. After this incident, everyone came back to their senses and regained some rationality and calmness. With this look, everyone realized that unknowingly, there were already so many corpses beside Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. It really made them completely stunned. The other party was only 4 new cultivators. With so many of them besieging them, not only did they not gain any benefits, but they also made so many people pay with their lives. In comparison, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's strength was really terrifying. For a moment, many cultivators' expressions changed. Previously, they only thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had used some special method to hook up with Master Long, causing Master Long to be obsessed and be willing to give them 3 demon pet eggs. They had never thought that there would be any other reason, but after such a battle, they suddenly realized that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's strength was indeed extraordinary. Just this potential alone was much stronger than most of them present. At least, if it were them, they would not be able to hold on for so long in such a group fight, nor would they be able to have such a terrifying battle record. At this moment, everyone finally understood that perhaps Master Long wasn't blinded by greed and decided to give the 3 demon beast eggs to them. Instead, he truly took a fancy to their cultivation talent and did so. This news had been spread earlier, but no one believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could catch Master Long's eye, so it was naturally ignored by everyone. Now that they had personally witnessed the fighting power of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, they felt that this news might be true. If it was an ordinary 5th-level Purple Realm cultivator, it would be impossible to burst out such a strong fighting power. Moreover, after fighting for such a long time, if it was an ordinary cultivator, their physical strength would have been exhausted long ago. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was a human, and it seemed that it was not a big deal. With this comparison, they could see the difference between Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's ordinary cultivators. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but feel regret. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were really such geniuses, then their future development would be limitless. Once they became Inner Palace disciples, they would truly have a meteoric rise. Since they had done such a thing, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would definitely not let them off. Everyone's expressions changed again and again as various considerations flashed through their minds. In the end, their gazes became firm and ruthless. We must kill them. Otherwise, our days will not be good. No one knew who shouted first, but the rest of the cultivators all agreed one after another. Chapter 3379. On this point, everyone had already reached a consensus. If they couldn't deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others today, then they would face a lot of trouble in the future. Since Master Long was willing to give them 3 demon pet eggs, this proved how much Master Long valued them. Once they complained to Master Long, then they would have to bear the consequences. Immediately, everyone's attacks towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 became more and more ruthless. This was not only related to the problem of seizing the demon beast eggs, but also related to their future safety and development. Looking at everyone's storm-like attacks, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were also barely able to resist. The pressure was getting bigger and bigger. Previously, when everyone was focused on dealing with them, they were also thinking about how to fish in troubled waters to save more energy and seize the demon pet eggs. But now, they were completely on the same side, so they were already sparing no effort to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 could be said to be under a lot of pressure. Their individual fighting strength was indeed not bad, but facing so many cultivators, the consumption of their bodies was not small, and their attention was even more focused. If they were not careful, they would be ambushed by the other party. Once they were injured, then the situation would only get worse and worse. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen unleashed their blood aura field at almost the same time. The amount of elemental energy consumed by unleashing the blood aura field was not small. Previously, in order to save more elemental energy, the 2 of them had not unleashed the blood aura field. At this moment, the pressure was getting bigger and bigger, and they could no longer hold on, so they could only unleash the blood aura field. As Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen unleashed their blood aura field, their auras also instantly rose. After Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's auras rose, the original pressure immediately weakened by a lot. Shengguan Yingying and Wen Ziren also quietly heaved a sigh of relief and had a chance to breathe. Everyone's expression changed when they saw the blood aura released by Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. They had long known that 2 of the people in Bailey Hongzhuang's team were the inheritors of the blood aura field, but they had never been able to determine who they were. Now, they finally knew. Not only that, after witnessing the sudden increase in strength of Bailey Hongzhuang, they finally understood how powerful the inheritance of the blood aura was. Previously, they had only heard rumors, so they didn't feel anything. However, now that they had seen it with their own eyes, they finally understood the effect of the blood aura field on one's strength. Immediately, they became extremely jealous. Chapter 3380. Flowers of blood blossomed on the bodies of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Their physical strength was gradually weakening and a sense of exhaustion was slowly creeping up on them. Even though they had the ability to fight above their level, their opponents were not ordinary people. Furthermore, almost all of them were full of energy. This made them feel like they were unable to continue. Taking turns to fight was a battle of attrition. The longer it took, the more difficult it would be to persevere. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had unleashed the blood aura, the pressure on them had been greatly reduced. However, the rate at which their primary energy was being depleted was extremely terrifying. Even though they had continuously used pills to replenish their primary energy, the rate at which their primary energy was being replenished could not keep up with the rate at which their primary energy was being depleted. Bang! Shengguan Yingying was directly knocked to the ground by her opponent. Her beautiful face was pale and her speed of standing up was much slower as she gradually lost her strength. Everyone's eyes lit up when they saw that Shengguan Yingying had created an opening. Immediately, they launched an even fiercer attack towards Shengguan Yingying. Yingying. Seeing that Shengguan Yingying was in danger, Ziren's eyes flashed with anxiety. He immediately stood in front of Shengguan Yingying to block the attacks for her. Ding ding ding. The sound of swords clashing rang out continuously. Ziren's eyes had long turned red. These people in front of him actually wanted to take his Yingying's life. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shangguan Yingying quickly stood up. However, Ziren had taken on too many attacks alone. He had been stabbed in the waist. Seeing that Ziren and Shangguan Yingying were in danger, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart skipped a beat. She quickly released Baishe. Roar! Baishe let out a deafening roar as soon as he appeared. It immediately shocked the surrounding cultivators. Seeing the sudden appearance of this ferocious beast, the crowd could not help but be stunned. However, they were not too surprised. From the information that they had gathered earlier, they already knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had contracted beasts. Moreover, these contracted beasts were not weak. When Baishe saw this scene, the light in his eyes sharpened. Bailey Hongzhuang said directly, "Go and help Yingying and the others." Although her and Di Beichen's situation was not optimistic, they could at least hold on for a while. Ziren and Shangguan Yingying were in danger. If the White Lion did not help, their lives could be in danger at any time. With the addition of the White Lion, the pressure on Ziren and Shangguan Yingying was greatly alleviated. However, they felt an unbearable pain all over their bodies. Needless to say, their wounds hurt. Even their muscles felt an indescribable soreness. It was as if every time they swung their swords, they needed to exert a great deal of strength. Their hands gradually became numb, and their attacks gradually slowed down. The situation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others uncontrollably became worse. In such a battle of attrition, even a body made of iron would not be able to withstand it. The smell of blood continued to spread throughout the area. Flowers of blood bloomed on the ground, enchanting and poignant. When the cultivators in the outer palace saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had managed to withstand their attacks for so long, the fear in their hearts grew. This level of battle power was simply too terrifying. If it were any of them, they would not have the confidence to do so. However, the four newcomers had managed to hold on for so long. After exclaiming in surprise, the crowd felt a lingering fear. Chapter 3381. They can't take it anymore. Take this opportunity to kill them. That's right. As long as we kill them, this demon pet egg will be ours. There were more and more wounds on Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Her white robe was now dyed red with blood. Her delicate and perfect face was pale, without the slightest trace of blood, but her bright phoenix eyes were always shining with a firm and persistent light. Every face in front of her was clearly imprinted in her heart. As long as they didn't die today, she would return all of this pain to these guys in front of her. Di Beichen's handsome face was already stained with a few drops of blood. The blood on his clothes was already indistinguishable from his own or someone else's. All of it gathered together, and his killing intent was also getting stronger and stronger. Shangguan Yingying and Wen Ziren's situation was even worse than Bailey Hongzhuang's. Ever since they were injured, their movements had become sluggish, causing the frequency of their injuries to increase. Ziren's face had already become abnormally pale due to excessive blood loss. His hand that was holding the sword trembled slightly. Every bit of strength in his body had been squeezed out. At this moment, he was completely relying on his willpower to continue fighting. Even he himself didn't know when he would completely lose his strength and faint. However, he knew that he couldn't fall like this. Once he fell like this, he would never wake up again. The light in Shangguan Yingying's eyes became more and more ruthless, revealing an unspeakable resentment. These damned guys in front of them had forced them to such a state just for some benefits. They were simply abominable. Even though they had already expected such a tragic scene, when all of this really happened, the resentment and anger in their hearts continued to surge. They couldn't wait to kill all of these guys in front of them. Fortunately, the world was peaceful. The manager of the outer palace really came back. We've already persevered for so long, but we haven't seen any trace of them. Shangguan Yingying's face was pale, and her voice was filled with despair. They clearly knew that this was an unwinnable battle. Their only hope was to wait for the manager to appear. However, it had already been so long, and the other party still hadn't made any movements. Perhaps the other party didn't plan to come out at all. Xiren's face was also a little ugly. According to his judgment, the matter had already escalated to such a point that the other party should have appeared. Logically speaking, with such a huge commotion, they shouldn't be able to sit by and do nothing. He couldn't figure it out. There were already many corpses on the ground. He felt that no force would sit by and do nothing in such a situation. However, the other party hadn't shown up for so long, which made him unable to figure it out. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen also had a trace of doubt in their eyes. They felt that their previous judgment could not be wrong, but after so long, the manager still had not appeared, and they could not help but feel a little nervous. Could it be that Penglai Palace's management of the cultivators was so lax that no matter what kind of commotion was caused in the outer hall, it could not attract them to come out? If that was the case, then there was a problem with their judgment. Chapter 3382. Di Beichen's eyes darkened slightly. Logically speaking, this shouldn't happen. Could it be that we haven't caused enough of a ruckus? Hearing Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but look at each other. If this situation was not considered big enough, then what would be considered big enough? If this continues, we won't be able to hold on any longer. Xiren's expression was extremely ugly. He had already used all of his skills and the strength in his body had been gradually depleted. If this continued, he could fall into a coma at any time. These vile people who only cared about benefits had long regarded them as prey. Once they fell, the only outcome would be death. That's right. If this continues, all of us will die here. Shangguan Yingying glanced around. Although they had killed a lot of cultivators, compared to this huge number, what they had done was still not enough. This was because the number of disciples in the outer palace of Penglai Palace was too great. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes also showed a touch of worry. She did not understand where their judgment had gone wrong, but it was obvious that they had to think of other ways at the moment. If the manager was unwilling to appear, they could not just throw their lives away here. When the other cultivators saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, as well as Baisher, were gradually losing their strength, their eyes lit up with excitement. They can't hold on any longer. Take this opportunity to kill them directly. Everyone, work harder. These 4 guys are not far from death. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 looked at the covetous eyes of the people around them. They were like evil spirits, wishing that they could die as soon as possible so that they could divide their wealth. I will never let these guys take advantage of me. Shangguan Yingying's eyes flashed with a ruthless light. A crazy idea gradually emerged in her mind. She was already unable to continue fighting. At this moment, every attack she made was relying on her own will to fight. She did not know how long she could last. The only thing she knew was that even if she died, she would not let these people in front of her gain the slightest advantage. Even if I'm really going to die, I'd rather self-destruct than leave these guys with any benefits. The light in Shangguan Yingying's eyes became crazier and more ruthless. After fighting to this point, she no longer expected to survive. She only had one thought now: even if she was going to die, she had to drag a few people down with her. These guys wanted to kill her so that they could benefit from it, but she was going to drag them down to hell with her. The gazes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others changed when they heard Shangguan Yingying's words. They never expected Shangguan Yingying to be so unyielding as to even think of such a plan. Yingying, don't be rash. Just because it's not the last moment doesn't mean that we don't have a chance to turn things around. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly spoke up. Even though the situation before them was very difficult to resolve, this did not mean that they had to die. She had to first dispel Shangguan Yingying's thoughts. Chapter 3383. You're already on the path to death and you still want to live on. What a fool's dream. In my opinion, you might as well stop struggling and just stop. We'll give you a quick death and save you the pain. That's right. Since you can't hold on any longer, why continue to make things difficult for yourself? Death is also a form of relief for you. The outer palace disciples who were besieging them smiled. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were now cornered beasts. They believed that in less than a quarter of an hour, the four of them would die by their hands. There was indeed a manager in the outer palace. However, the conflicts in the outer palace were not small. Ordinary movements would not alarm them at all. Although today's movements were much larger than usual, they were already prepared. Therefore, they immediately used their primary energy to prop up a barrier and suppress the movements. This way, the manager would not be in a hurry to come out and take a look. They also had enough time to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not notice this detail. Therefore, they were still waiting for help. Listening to the other party's merciless ridicule, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart surged with madness. She still wanted to stay in Penglai Palace, so she was not willing to go to the extreme. If there was really no room for negotiation, then she could only give it her all. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Di Beichen. Di Beichen noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze and immediately understood what she meant. He immediately nodded. Now, this was the only way. Since the other party wanted them dead, the only thing they could do was to let the other party die first. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze deepened. Since the manager of Penglai Island was unwilling to come out, she would solve this problem herself. If you don't offend me, I won't offend you. Since you're forcing me step by step, don't blame me for being ruthless. Bailey Hongzhuang's sharp eyes exuded a shocking murderous aura. Her gaze swept across everyone in front of her. She rarely used such means, but now that she was forced to this point, she had no other choice. These people in front of her all deserved to die. When Xiren and Shangguan Yingying could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. They did not know that Bailey Hongzhuang still had a backup plan. Di Beichen's expression was very indifferent. He had already discussed this with Bailey Hongzhuang. This was their trump card, and if they could avoid it, it would be best not to use it. Because once they used it, they could not be sure what kind of attitude Penglai Palace would have towards them. Perhaps they would no longer be a member of Penglai Palace from then on. Perhaps there would be an even worse outcome. As of now, the number of outer hall disciples who had died in their hands was not small. If the number increased, the manager of Penglai Palace would not be able to bear it. However, now that they had been forced to a dead end, there was no other way. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the other cultivators couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. There was a burst of surprise in their hearts. They didn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang's group had a way to escape at this time. Chapter 3384. What a joke. I don't believe that they still have a way to get out of this predicament. They must be deliberately scaring us. Aren't you talking nonsense? They're already at the end of their rope. If they want to blame someone, they can only blame their luck for being too good. Their own strength isn't strong enough, yet they still possess such a demon pet egg. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. As for Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four, everyone didn't have any special feelings. They also didn't want to kill them because of this. It's just that the demon pet egg they possessed was too tempting. If they wanted to snatch the demon pet egg back, the only way was to take the lives of Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. So what if we let them brag for a while? After they die, they won't have the slightest chance. Everyone mocked one after another, but their eyes were constantly flashing with a bit of light. Once Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 died, it was also a problem for them to distribute the demon pet egg with so many people present. This battle wouldn't end with the death of Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 3. Since you all like to die so much, then all of you can go and die. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes turned sharp, and a surge of killing intent surged out. Relying on strength, they could only fight until here, but relying on poison techniques, they could completely get rid of the predicament in front of them. In the next moment, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang moved almost at the same time. Immediately after, in everyone's line of sight, they only saw a beautiful cherry blossom between them. A faint fragrance entered their nostrils, causing them to be unable to help but take a deep breath. Such a refreshing fragrance was truly hard to come by. Everyone only felt that after smelling this fragrance, their entire spirit was shaken. The original bit of exhaustion seemed to have disappeared in an instant, and their entire bodies seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, entering an extremely good state. The romantic cherry blossoms quietly danced, landing on the enchanting blooming blood flowers. Within the beauty, there was a bit of strangeness. The rich fragrance spread throughout the entire outer hall, and everyone was intoxicated as they smelled this wisp of fragrance. Originally, there were still many cultivators who were extremely wary of this fragrance, but after seeing that everyone was fine after smelling this fragrance, and on the contrary, their entire spirit, energy, and spirit were raised, they relaxed a little. Everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang in confusion. They didn't understand what they were doing. They were already at the end of their rope, and now they helped everyone raise their condition to the extreme. Wasn't this speeding up their own death? However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, Xiao He, Xiao Bai and Bai Shi had already quietly returned, by Bailey Hongzhuang's, Xiao Bai, and White. Based on their understanding of their master, the stronger the fragrance, the more intoxicating it was, the more poisonous it was. If they entered the chaos ring first, they would be able to avoid being affected. However, they were still filled with curiosity towards the final effect. Xiren and Bailey Hongzhuang had only quietly watched Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang's actions from the beginning to the end. They were completely unaware of Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang's plans, but they had already built up complete trust between them. Chapter 3385. Even if the other cultivators did not believe it, they believed it unwaveringly. The rich fragrance gradually spread. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's faces were dignified. They had already held their breath, not willing to smell the fragrance even a little bit. In this world, the more beautiful something was, the more poisonous it was. The richer the fragrance, the more unusual it was. The crowd was still attacking Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were also passively defending against the enemy. However, the injuries on their bodies were increasing. Their fresh blood mixed with the rich fragrance actually had a sweet taste. Shangguaningying and Wen Xiren's spirits were greatly improved after smelling the fragrance. They felt that their arms, which were originally unable to move, had regained their strength. Immediately, their speed in attacking the enemy increased. No one noticed that the faces of the cultivators in front of them were gradually turning red. Their eyes were filled with intense excitement. "Wife, how long will it take for the drug to take effect?" Di Beichen asked softly. Their situation was getting worse. If this continued, they would no longer have the strength to fight back in less than 10 minutes. It's starting to take effect now. As they continue to use their primary energy, the speed at which the poison takes effect will increase. Through their primary energy, it will completely enter their bodies. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were cold and ruthless. It won't take long for it to take effect completely. She had always believed that every injustice had its perpetrator and every debt its debtor. Even if she had the ability to attack a group of people, she was unwilling to use it most of the time. That was because she did not want to affect the other innocent cultivators. However, there were hundreds of cultivators in front of her. Every single one of them wanted to take their lives. Therefore, she could only use this method. It was a cruel and bloody method. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were bitterly holding on under the siege of the crowd. Not only were the cultivators' faces gradually turning red, even their eyes were gradually turning red. However, they were too excited to notice it. They only felt that their strength had increased tremendously. They had never been in such a good state before. This feeling made them feel like they were willing to compete with anyone. It was as if they had already become the strongest in the world, and no one could be compared to them. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curved into a cold smile. It was starting to take effect. The next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other and quickly retreated a few steps. At the same time, the cultivators surrounding Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three paused as well. Doubt flashed through their eyes at the same time, as if they had forgotten what they were supposed to do. However, a look of understanding flashed in their eyes, and they began to attack the cultivators beside them in a frenzy. Every one of them seemed to treat the cultivators around them as their irreconcilable enemies. They didn't care about the condition of their own bodies and only wanted to kill the other party. In this state of excitement, no one seemed to feel the pain on their bodies. The pain seemed to have completely disappeared, leaving only the carefree feeling of battle. Chapter 3386. However, the two immediately noticed that Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying were also in the same situation. With a move, the two immediately appeared beside Shangguan Yingying and Wen Ziren. In the next second, the two did not hesitate to directly knock out Ziren and Shangguan Yingying. If this continued, Shangguan Yingying and Ziren would also begin to harm themselves. "Wife, are Ziren and Yingying okay?" Di Beichen was worried. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head slightly and said, "As long as they take the antidote now, they will be fine. Don't worry." Originally, she wanted to directly remind Ziren and Shangguan Yingying to hold their breath, but at that time, whether it was Shangguan Yingying or Ziren, they were unable to continue. Although this fragrance was poisonous, it could stimulate the best state of the cultivator in a short time. In that case, it was difficult to rely on the strength of Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying, so this was the only way. If not, I am afraid that Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying's lives would be in danger now. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen was also relieved. Today's situation was really beyond their expectations. They did not expect that from the beginning to the end, the manager of Penglai Palace did not intend to come forward. After Bailey Hongzhuang quickly gave Shangguan Yingying and Shangguan Yingying the antidote, the two of them slowly woke up. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying were both stunned, then their eyes widened, and they quickly said, "What's the situation now? Are we out of trouble?" Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head, indicating Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying to see the situation around them clearly. "Not really out of trouble, but we have a chance to breathe for a while." After Ziren and Shangguan Yingying saw the chaotic scene in front of them, they realized that today's matter was not over. However, after seeing the performance of the other cultivators, the two of them could not help but be stunned. For a moment, they could not recover from their shock. "What's the situation now?" Shangguan Yingying's eyes widened. "Why are they fighting each other?" After pondering for a moment, Wen Ziren's eyes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. "This is the method you two used, right?" Di Beichen nodded. "Yes, this is the poison concocted by Hongzhuang. You were poisoned before, but you are fine now. I knew you guys still had a trump card. But what exactly is going on?" Is there something wrong with these guys' brains? Shang Guanying's face was full of curiosity. Even though there was a burst of pain in her body, she did not care about it now. She just wanted to know what was going on. You have to ask Hong Zhuang. Di Beichen said. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged, then said, didn't we encounter a situation of being besieged when we were on Monkey Island? The poison I used back then was similar to the poison I'm using now. However, the poison I used this time is of a higher grade and more powerful. Speaking of which, this was the poison she made after being inspired by the last time. Usually, even if they had a conflict with cultivators, it was only a few people. This kind of poison was not needed at all. Chapter 3387. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been extremely talented in the art of medicine and poison. As long as she wanted to concoct a poison, she would be able to concoct it easily. When she was in the magic tower, she found that the materials in the magic tower were very abundant. When she saw some materials that she was interested in, Bailey Hongzhuang did not hesitate to exchange for them. Although the area of Penglai Island was not as big as the outside world, the heaven and earth treasures here were much more than the outside world. A lot of herbs that were not usually seen could be seen here. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been very interested in herbs, so she collected a lot of them. When they were heading to Penglai Island, because there were too many uncertain factors, she deliberately concocted a lot of poisons to prevent them from being in danger because they were not strong enough. However, the things that happened in the end clearly proved that she had foresight. If she did not prepare these herbs, their situation would definitely be very bad. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Shang Guanying and the others also understood. Although half a year had passed, they still remembered clearly what had happened on the Monkey Island. So these cultivators started killing each other like the gold essence piebald monkeys on the Monkey Island. Can they recover? They can't recover on their own. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head, unless there is an antidote, but I did not concoct a lot of antidotes. The reason why she concocted the poison was to kill them. How could she concoct an antidote to help them escape? The reason why she concocted a few antidotes was to prevent accidents from happening, such as her own people being poisoned. These people are so despicable, they should be killed and sent to hell. Shang Guanying's eyes were filled with hatred. This kind of group attack really made her angry to the extreme. If Bailey Hongzhuang still had such a method, then their lives would really be lost. Ziren nodded, these people. They all deserve to die. In the vision of the four people, these outer palace disciples had already killed until their eyes turned red. Everyone in front of them had become their enemy. This dazzling and tyrannical martial skill continued to erupt. Flowers of blood continued to bloom. The blood on the ground was getting more and more. However, no one had the slightest intention of stopping. The thick smell of blood gradually enveloped the entire outer palace. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others took the opportunity to consume the pills. The injuries on their bodies were much more serious than the other cultivators. Their white clothes had already been dyed red with blood. There were countless big and small wounds on them. It could be said that they were riddled with holes. Just to recover from these injuries, it would take a long time. Xiao He, Xiao Bai and the others saw that the poison had dissipated and ran out. Seeing the state of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, the six contracted beasts felt their hearts ache. Bailey Hongzhuang stroked Baisher's fur. In the previous battle, Baisher had helped them block a lot of attacks. Now, Baisher's body was covered in blood and the wounds were even more shocking. Looking at the wounds on Baisher's body, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but feel her heart ache. Suddenly, her hatred for these cultivators grew. Chapter 3388. Feeling his master's heartache for him, Baisher could not help but say, "Master, you don't have to worry. I'm fine." In the previous battle, the White Lion had expended a lot of energy. However, as a demonic beast, its endurance and combat strength were not bad. It was also a little glad that it had not slacked off these days. Otherwise, the situation just now would have been really terrible. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart ached slightly. Seeing Baisher injured, this feeling was even worse than her being injured. She stroked Baisher's soft fur and said, "It's been hard on you today. Being able to fight side by side with Master has always been the happiest thing for Baisher." Baisher's eyes shone brightly. He had always hoped to be able to fight side by side with Master. To be able to help Master was the happiest thing for him. As for being injured, he did not care at all. Master's injuries were obviously not lighter than his. Bailey Hongzhuang rubbed her face against Baisher. A smile slowly appeared on her lips and a trace of warmth emerged in her heart. "Master, since these guys want our things so much, we can't let them take advantage of us." Xiao He came in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three in Baisher, Xiao He and Xiao Bai, who were responsible for the sneak attack, did not suffer any serious injuries. They were just exhausted. Since coming to Penglai Island, they had encountered one trouble after another. However, it was really the first time that they had encountered such a miserable situation. Almost everyone had no strength left. If another opponent appeared now, they would not have any strength to fight back at all. Fortunately, no one else would appear for the time being. Hearing Xiao He's words, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but ask, "What do you want to do? There are so many guys here. Collect their Qinquan bags. This is a huge sum of money." Xiao He's eyes shone brightly. They had spent so much effort and almost lost their lives here. No matter what, they had to collect some interest. Bailey Hongzhuang finally understood. Their current situation was really too bad, so she didn't think of this at all. Now that she was reminded by Xiao He, she immediately nodded. "That's right. Go ahead and collect your spoils." Xiao He and Xiao Bai still had strength, but the four of them had long lost all their strength. At this moment, they sat on the ground and did not even want to move. "Yes." In the next second, Xiao He and Xiao Bai brought the three newborn beasties to collect their spoils of war. Although the three little fellows did not understand what had happened, they felt a pang of heartache when they saw that their master was injured. Now that Xiao He and Xiao Bai were leading the way, they naturally wanted to do whatever they could to help. Under such circumstances, the five little fellows quickly scuttled into the chaotic crowd, emptying one Qinquan bag after another. Although the wealth of the Outer Palace disciples could not be considered rich, with so many people gathered together, it was still an extremely rich resource. As the Outer Palace disciples began to kill each other, they naturally did not care about hiding the ripples from the battle. Immediately, the ripples quickly spread. Chapter 3389. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three left, they did not feel the slightest fluctuation of elemental energy for a long time. This could not help but make the two of them feel a little strange. Could it be? The situation outside was not as bad as they had expected. Logically speaking, once this news spread out, it would definitely attract the jealousy of many cultivators. They were very clear about the personalities of the disciples in the Outer Palace. Moreover, the Outer Palace had never prohibited fights between cultivators, so this point was magnified. Snatching things from others had become a common thing. The only difference was that even if someone wanted to snatch something, it would only be a few people. There were very few things that could attract everyone's attention like a demon pet egg. It seems that our judgment is wrong. Yizihua's eyes flashed with surprise, Could it be that these four little fellows have some special method that actually made everyone give up on their plans? Hearing this, Long Yanwei's expression was somewhat complicated. Logically speaking, this problem shouldn't be so easy to solve. However, until now, there has been no movement. Perhaps we have really underestimated them. According to his judgment, he believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three would use this opportunity to cause quite a commotion. As a result, they would naturally make a move as well. However, this would have nothing to do with Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, there was no movement at all after so long. This proved that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's actions were different from his judgment. Thinking back to their confident looks, Long Yanwei was really curious about how they would solve this problem. Although these four little fellows haven't been in the Penglai Island for long, all of them are very smart. Yi Zihua smiled slightly. I think that maybe you made the right bet this time. However, after Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua had relaxed for a period of time, suddenly, a terrifying wave of elemental energy came from the direction of the outer palace. Feeling the fluctuation of the elemental energy, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua's expressions couldn't help but change. This was because the fluctuation of the elemental energy was too shocking. Why would there be such a huge fluctuation of elemental energy? A tinge of nervousness surfaced on Yi Zihua's face. Logically speaking, even if the two sides had clashed, it was impossible for the aura to be so terrifying. Based on the enormous fluctuation of origin energy, they were able to determine that there were at least 100 people launching attacks at the same time. This was a little too terrifying. Long Yanwei's expression changed as a thought quickly flashed through his mind. Perhaps, we were too careless. Hearing this, Yi Zihua was slightly startled, and quickly understood what Long Yanwei meant. You mean that they blocked this origin energy fluctuation? Other than this, I can't think of any other reason. Long Yanwei's face was gloomy to the extreme. He gave the demon pet eggs to Di Beichen and the others because he valued them greatly. He wanted to use this method to increase the strength of Di Beichen and the others, but he didn't want Di Beichen and the others to lose their lives just like that. If his actions caused Di Beichen and the others to lose their lives, then the one who would feel guilty would be him. They've been gone for a long time. That means... Chapter 3390. Almost at the first moment he guessed the situation, Yi Zihua had already made a judgment in his heart. They ignored the fact that the outer palace disciples were all old foxes and never thought that they would use this move to shield the fluctuations of origin energy. Therefore, they did not go out to take a look. Now that so much time had passed and the origin energy fluctuations that erupted were so shocking, presumably, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had already fallen. It was just that the other cultivators were fighting over the Qiankuan bags of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Thinking of this, Yi Zihua's heart sank. Not only because Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had lost their lives for no reason, but also because Long Yanwei's 3 demon pet eggs had been wasted just like that. One had to know that back then, they had spent a lot of effort to obtain these 3 demon pet eggs. They had always been Long Yanwei's treasured collection, but now, they had just been contracted and had actually fallen along with their master. Let's go out and take a look. Long Yanwei had obviously thought of this situation. This was undoubtedly what he did not want to see the most, but he still had a trace of hope in his heart. As long as he did not see the corpses of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 with his own eyes, then everything was still possible. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua flew towards the direction of the outer palace, the closer they got to the outer palace, the stronger the smell of blood they discovered. Immediately, their expressions became even more unsightly. Such a strong smell of blood, I'm afraid that many disciples have died. Yi Zihua frowned. If there were only a few people, the smell of blood would definitely not be so strong. And to be so strong to such an extent, there would at least be dozens or even hundreds of people. Although there would often be fights in the outer palace of the Penglai Palace, there would only be a dozen people at most. However, such a strong smell of blood, this was the first time it had happened. Long Yanwei's heart sank even more. I'm afraid that they were besieged by all the outer palace disciples. At this moment, Long Yanwei's heart also produced a strong sense of regret. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three left, he should have followed them out to take a look. He had been too negligent. As Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua got closer and closer to the outer palace, the thick smell of blood almost reached a choking level. The two of them were extremely fast and directly climbed to the roof. Only then did they clearly see the situation in front of them. However, when they saw the situation in front of them clearly, both of them couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others rested for a moment and recovered a bit of strength before slowly standing up. Even though they had already taken the medicinal pills, their condition was not much better. Their bodies were still sore, and they could only recover after they returned to their rooms. As for these fellows who were killing each other in front of them, they had no intention of paying any attention to them. Since blood had already flowed like a river, he might as well be more thorough and let these fellows all fall here. They would never show mercy to anyone who offended them. So what if they had the advantage in numbers? When they had the idea of killing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, they should have been prepared to do so. They carried out their revenge thoroughly. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua arrived, this was the scene they saw. There were many corpses lying on the ground, and the ground had long been dyed red with blood. The thick smell of blood was coming from here. Chapter 3391. Even though they had already expected that the situation would be very tragic, the scene in front of them still exceeded their expectations. This was a bit shocking. Such a thing happening in the outer palace of the Penglai Palace was something that had never happened before. Yanwei, these 3 demon pet eggs of yours have really caused a bloody battle. Yi Zihua couldn't help but sigh. The 3 demon pet eggs did indeed have an incomparable attraction. However, it was still a bit too shocking to cause such a large number of casualties. Thinking about it, no matter if it was him or Long Yanwei, they never thought that it would cause such a huge commotion. If the palace master knew about this, it would probably be very troublesome. However, all the cultivators who were recruited by Penglai Palace had a certain level of ability. Usually, small-scale battles were harmless. However, from the scene in front of them, it was clear that a small half of the disciples from the outer palace were involved. Even they couldn't ignore this loss. Long Yanwei's expression was extremely ugly. He also didn't think that the commotion would be so terrifying. Just for 3 demon pet eggs, so many cultivators had actually fallen. Although these guys had always valued benefits, they weren't so stupid as to directly throw their lives away here. Let's go ahead and take a look. Long Yanwei's voice was slightly heavy. In front of them, they could only see the corpses on the ground. However, the battle fluctuations were still a little further ahead. Yi Zihua nodded and immediately followed Long Yanwei to the front. When his shoes stepped on the ground, the soles of his feet were immediately stained with blood. The entire ground was now dyed red with blood. That sticky feeling couldn't help but make people feel uncomfortable. Not long after, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua saw the situation of everyone's battle. Even they couldn't help but be speechless at such a tragic situation. It was simply too shocking. Long Yanwei glanced at the crowd and quickly found Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 who were preparing to leave. His eyes immediately revealed a dense surprise. Not only Long Yanwei, Yi Zihua also noticed this and couldn't help but be surprised. According to their judgment, it was impossible for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to survive under such a siege. However, although Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were severely injured, they were still alive. This was far beyond their expectations. Long Yanwei quietly heaved a sigh of relief. He had always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had already fallen, and felt extremely guilty in his heart. He did not expect them to be so powerful that they could still persist in such a situation. However, when they thought of this, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua could not help but look at each other. The fact that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were able to survive despite being besieged like this meant that their combat strength was simply too heaven-defying. If this demonic pet egg wasn't contracted, they could still understand if they took out the demonic pet egg to avoid a calamity. However, the demonic pet egg had already been contracted. There was absolutely no possibility of taking out the demonic pet egg. Under such circumstances, the fact that the four of them were still able to survive was simply too shocking. For a moment, even they couldn't understand how Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were able to do this. In the next second, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua arrived beside Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. "How are you guys?" Chapter 3392. They thought that it was impossible for the manager of Penglai Palace to come out. They did not expect that after they had settled everything, Long Yanwei and Long Zhenzheng would actually come. "We're fine," Di Beichen slowly said. At this moment, their feelings were somewhat complicated. They originally thought that with such a huge battle fluctuation, it should have attracted them over no matter what. However, when they were at the end of the line and there was no movement at all, they could not help but feel a little disappointed. How did things turn out like this? Yi Zihua frowned. The situation in front of him was really terrible. However, it's good that you're fine. Otherwise, Yanwei would probably blame himself to death. Hearing Yi Zihua's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but look at each other. There was some doubt in their hearts. Without waiting for them to ask the reason, Yi Zihua had already started to speak. "These fellows from the outer palace are getting more and more cunning. They actually learned how to hide the fluctuation of yuan power. This matter must be dealt with properly. Otherwise, if they use this method in the future, we won't even know how much trouble they will cause." Dense anger surged onto Yi Zihua's face. Such a big matter was actually concealed like this. If they had not hidden the fluctuation of yuan power, this matter would not have developed to such an irreversible stage. As soon as these words were spoken, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three finally understood. Dense astonishment surfaced in their eyes. "I was wondering why no one had come. So this is the problem." When Xiren came to a sudden understanding. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out why no one had come over when the commotion had already reached such an extent. It turned out that these outer hall disciples had already discussed a countermeasure for the sake of taking their lives. These guys are too shrewd. We didn't even notice this before. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. It seemed that their judgment was not wrong at all. It was just that they had overlooked this point. "All of you, stop!" Long Yanwei sternly shouted. Dense anger burned in his eyes. These fellows were really lawless. If he did not properly teach these fellows a lesson, they would simply be out of his control in the future. However, after Long Yanwei's voice sounded, the group of outer palace disciples did not seem to have heard half of it. Their hands did not stop moving at all as they continued to attack the other party with all their might. Seeing this scene, Long Yanwei became increasingly angry. However, just as he was about to speak again, he suddenly discovered that there was something wrong with the state of the cultivators before him. "Zihua, what happened to them?" Long Yanwei frowned. After careful observation, he realized that these cultivators had flushed faces. Their eyes flickered with excitement, as if they were completely immersed in their own mental state. Yi Zihua also found the scene in front of him very strange. They seem to be controlled, and can't hear us. How could this be? For a moment, Long Yanwei could not help but be startled. How could so many cultivators suddenly fall into such a situation? In the next second, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua's gazes landed on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Do you know what's going on? Although it was a question, the two of them spoke with an affirmative tone. Chapter 3393. Hearing Long Yanwei's question, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but look at each other. Their feelings were extremely complicated. If Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua hadn't appeared too late, they wouldn't have used this trick. However, now that things had come to this point, whether to admit it or not was a problem. They are poisoned. After thinking for a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang said in a deep voice. Both Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua were very smart people. Even if they denied it, the other party wouldn't believe it. In that case, they might as well admit it directly. Poisoned? Hearing the word poisoned again, Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei were a little stunned. Last time, when Bailey Hongzhuang and the others dealt with Gao Hanchan, the method they used to win was also poison. However, at that time, they didn't take it too seriously. They only thought that it was normal for cultivators to have some life-saving methods. However, this time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' solution to their predicament was still poison. This was a little surprising. Could it be that the poison last time wasn't a trump card that they deliberately kept, but that they were very good at using poison? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly. That's right. Then what will happen to them in the end? Long Yanwei asked in a deep voice. Death. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was cold. When she said these two words, there was no expression or emotion. These guys in front of her all deserve to die. They will all die. Yi Zihua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. There were nearly 100 cultivators in front of them, and all of them were above the 5th level of the Purple Realm. All of them would die. That's right. Di Beichen said indifferently. When they made this decision, they had already expected such a scene to happen. Therefore, even when Yi Zihua asked, he was very calm. Looking at the indifferent appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. They didn't expect these little guys to be so extreme. It was completely beyond their expectations. If you do this, you will be punished in the Penglai Palace. Long Yanwei frowned slightly. The situation in front of him was not what he wanted to see. Hearing this, Shangguan Yingying's face was filled with dissatisfaction. If we didn't do this, we would be the ones who died now. They were merely defending themselves. If it weren't for the fact that these fellows in front of them had gone too far and forced them into a corner, they wouldn't have resorted to such means. After careful consideration, Long Yanwei roughly understood the situation from before. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had used such a method from the beginning, then they would not have been injured at all. Right now, not only were they injured, but their injuries were also extremely serious. He could sense their dispirited auras. Clearly, they were already extremely weak. Presumably, they had fought head-on when they were besieged at the beginning. It was only when they were at the end of their rope that they were forced to use this move. This method was exactly the same as what he had guessed before. It was just that they hadn't thought that the origin energy waves would be blocked, causing these mistakes to occur. I know that this matter cannot be blamed on you. However, the damage done is not small. Why don't you hand over the antidote? We will deal with this matter, Long Yanwei said slowly. Chapter 3394. Sorry, I don't have the antidote. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua were both stunned. Their faces flashed with a thick look of astonishment. No antidote. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and explained, no one can make so many antidotes. Now she already knew that Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua had not come because their yuan power fluctuations were blocked. The dissatisfaction and grudge in her heart had disappeared, but she really did not have the antidote. Long Yanwei suddenly understood. Looking at the number of cultivators who had fallen into a trance, no one could make so many antidotes. Then what can we do now? Knock them out. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Hearing this, although Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua were very helpless, they could only do so. After completing all this, Bailey Hongzhuang told Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua the method of making the antidote. The four of them had already taken the lead to return to their residence. In the end, they could not get away with this matter because of Long Yanwei. Bailey Hongzhuang did not have the slightest sympathy for those cultivators and did not intend to let them go. However, she could not drag Long Yanwei down, so she chose to hand over the method of making the antidote. However, they originally had a lot of opponents. Now, after this battle, most of them had been dealt with. There were not many people left. It would not be too late to deal with them in the future. She believed that when those guys woke up, they would not dare to provoke them again unless they wanted to die. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three who had returned to the house suddenly seemed to have lost all their strength. They did not have the slightest bit of strength to move. Long Yanwei sent a doctor to help them treat their injuries. The doctor could not help but be dumbfounded when he saw the shocking wounds on their bodies. How are they? Long Yanwei asked aloud. After such a big thing happened today, his mood was also very bad. The palace master and the others had been out recently. There were not many people in Penglai Palace. He did not expect such a big mess to happen now. Their injuries are very serious. If they were an ordinary cultivator, I'm afraid that they would not have survived. However, their mental strength is very tenacious and their body's endurance is very strong. That's why they were able to hold on. The doctor's words were filled with deep sighs. Their bodies were riddled with injuries and there was almost no place that was intact. Hearing this, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua looked at each other. They were a little surprised. Their body's endurance was strong. This meant that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had suffered many injuries on a daily basis. That was why their body's endurance was so strong. It seemed that these four little fellows had spent a lot of effort in their cultivation. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to reach such a level. Can they keep their lives? The doctor nodded. Although the current situation is very bad, their perseverance is very tenacious. As long as they are nursed well, they will be fine. That's good. Long Yanwei was relieved. Now, we have to pay attention to the other cultivators. Compared to the situation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, it seemed that the situation of the other cultivators was more troublesome. Chapter 3395. Regarding this point, they had already heard the exact news from the other physicians. They had originally wanted to ask Bailey Hongzhuang about it, but Bailey Hongzhuang's injuries were very serious and she needed to rest properly. Therefore, they could only suppress their doubts for the time being and wait for Bailey Hongzhuang to recover before asking her. After this incident, they also understood that Bailey Hongzhuang's method of using poison was extremely terrifying. This was because all the physicians were extremely shocked and they found out about the power of the poison. This effect was simply too shocking. After reaching the Purple Realm cultivation, ordinary poisons would not have any effect on cultivators at all. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's poison technique was able to cause so many cultivators to fall victim to it at the same time. This showed just how powerful it was. According to the physicians, Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely an incomparably powerful poison master. This point had clearly exceeded Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua's expectations. With Bailey Hongzhuang's age, she was already an extremely rare genius to be able to reach the 5th level of the Purple Realm. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was also an extremely powerful medicine master. How could this not cause them to be astonished? From the perspective of poison techniques, Bailey Hongzhuang was simply a master who was on equal footing with them. It seemed that they had underestimated this four-man team. Just their combat strength alone was extremely terrifying when they burst out. In addition to Bailey Hongzhuang's identity as a poison master, even a large team would not be able to do anything to them. It was no wonder that they dared to provoke Gao Hanchun at such a young age and even destroyed the entire Heaven-Shaking Association. Their abilities were also very impressive. Yan Wei, from the looks of it, Di Beichen's four-man team's combat strength is much stronger than you think. The corner of Yi Zihua's lips curled into a faint smile. I now feel that your judgment is very correct. If this four-man team continues to develop, it's very likely that they will become famous in the future. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. However, the seriousness in his eyes did not disappear. Currently, compared to this, I am more worried about what kind of performance the Hall Chief will have after he returns. The Hall Master had only left with his men for a few days. Who would have thought that such a big thing would happen? When the Hall Master returned, his expression would definitely be very interesting. Hearing Long Yanwei's words, Yi Zihua thought for a moment, and the smile on his lips became a little awkward. This question, I can only give you an answer after the Hall Master returns. For the strength of the Outer Palace disciples to drop at such a time is not a good thing for us. Long Yanwei frowned. The decrease in the strength of the Outer Palace disciples meant that the strength of the entire Penglai Palace had also decreased. Now that things have come to this, what's the use of thinking about this? Yi Zihua patted Long Yanwei's shoulder. You don't have to worry too much. This is only a small part of it. Most of the disciples are training outside. Although their strength has decreased, it's not to the point where it's too serious. The number of Outer Palace disciples was very large. There were nearly 2,000 of them. There were more than 200 cultivators who besieged Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Now that nearly 200 had died, there were dozens of people whose strength had decreased. Although this number seemed to be a lot, compared to the number of Outer Palace disciples, it was not that exaggerated. Chapter 3396. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were severely injured, they had sustained minor injuries on a daily basis. Under such circumstances, their body's recovery abilities were extremely strong. Therefore, under the treatment of the doctor, the injuries of the four people were constantly improving. As a physician, Bailey Hongzhuang understood her own condition very well. However, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua clearly had no intention of harming them. Hence, she felt at ease and allowed the physician to treat them. Even though the battle this time had been extremely difficult, as long as they had endured through it, they would have reaped many benefits. At the very least, from now on, no one would dare to lay their hands on their contracted beasts. If one were to say that they had been easily bullied in the past, after this incident, anyone who dared to cause trouble for them would have to weigh their own abilities. Because they had used their actions to prove their abilities. Even though they were newcomers, they were definitely not people who could be bullied by ordinary people. 7 days later, the paleness on Bailey Hongzhuang's face has gradually dissipated and some rosy color has returned to her face. Master, how are your injuries? Xiao He and Xiao Bai stared worriedly at Bailey Hongzhuang. Even though their master had often been injured in the past, such serious injuries were rare. Seeing the worried looks on their faces, Bailey Hongzhuang stroked their little heads. An elegant and heartwarming smile appeared on her devastatingly beautiful face. Don't worry, my injuries are getting better every day. It's no longer a big problem now. I just need to recuperate for a while. Her broken bones had been reconnected and some of her external wounds were slowly healing. However, her internal injuries were clearly not something that could be completely healed in a short period of time. At the very least, she could only recuperate in peace for a short period of time. She could not think about going out into the world again. That's good. Xiao He and Xiao Bai patted their chests. Previously, their master had been in a comatose state and they could not help but worry. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze then landed on Baisher. Baisher's injuries were also very serious, but the doctor had already treated him. At this moment, the white lion was in a deep sleep. When it was healing, it would often fall into a deep sleep. When it woke up, it meant that its injuries had been healed. Master, when Master Long and Master Yi were talking, we vaguely heard some news. It seems like the strength of those poisoned fellows is starting to decline. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed with curiosity. It was really curious about this. Those fellows had pushed its master to such a state and almost lost their lives. However, Master Long had appeared and saved those fellows. It was already very dissatisfied in its heart. Now that it heard this news, it could not help but be excited. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded, it should have such an effect. So it's true. Xiao He and Xiao Bai's eyes lit up. Master, how did you do it? This poison has already stimulated all of their potential. It's like a pill that can save a life at a critical moment. The after effects are very terrifying. Chapter 3397. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Xiao He and Xiao Bai could not help but be shocked. They had only vaguely heard Master Long say that these people's cultivation had decreased, but they did not expect it to decrease by so much. It should be known that once one reached the Purple Realm, it would take a lot of effort and time just to increase one's cultivation by one level. Some people who were not outstanding enough would have to spend several years. Although their master's poison did not kill them, it directly caused their cultivation to decrease by so much. If those cultivators knew this fact, they would not be able to bear it. Although this feeling was not as good as death, it was not much better. In this way, those guys will probably be angry to death. Xiao Bai laughed out loud. Serves them right for coveting our things. I'm looking forward to those guys' expressions the next time they see us. I think they will want to kill us, right? Xiao He raised her eyebrows. However, I like the look in their eyes. The dark and deep phoenix eyes were filled with a cold and sinister light. Bailey Hongzhuang had already sentenced these guys to death in her heart. The reason why she chose to tell Master Long the method of making the antidote was firstly because she did not want to implicate Master Long who had helped them a lot. Secondly, because of this, she had already collected some interest. For cultivators, there was nothing more unbearable than the decrease of their cultivation. If those guys dared to cause trouble for them in the future, then she would naturally not be polite. Do you know how Beichen and the others are doing? Bailey Hongzhuang asked aloud. Under Master Long's arrangement, each of them had returned to their own rooms, so she did not know how they were recovering. In 7 days, according to her judgment, they should be much better than before. The medical skills of the doctors in Penglai Palace were also very good. At least she could not find any problems when treating her. I heard that their situation has improved a lot. Now Master Long and Master Yi are waiting for you to wake up so that they can ask about the decline of those cultivators' strength. Xiao He said slowly, Master, you've caused those cultivators' cultivation levels to drop collectively. Will this affect you? Such a big movement had already caused a sensation in the entire Penglai Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang had been recuperating in her room these days, so she did not know what had happened outside. However, Xiao He and Xiao Bai knew that almost everyone was talking about this matter now. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for a moment, then waved her hand and said, "Don't worry, there won't be any big problems." In the previous situation, they had no choice. Even if there was a punishment, what was done was done. There was no point in worrying about it now. Not only that, according to her judgment, Master Long would definitely think of a way to protect them. Since everyone is waiting for me to go out so that I can give them an explanation, then I might as well rest in my room for a few more days. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged her shoulders. She could imagine that those fellows whose cultivation had declined must be as anxious as ants on a hot pan, hoping that she would appear to give them some hope. Chapter 3398. Xiao He and Xiao Bai chuckled when they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Their master was becoming more and more two-faced. Under Bailey Hongzhuang's instructions, Xiao He and Xiao Bai shrunk their figures and went directly to Di Beichen and the other two's room to take a look. After knowing that Di Beichen and the other two's conditions were gradually improving, Bailey Hongzhuang was completely relieved. They obviously did not plan to go out immediately. Their injuries had not fully recovered yet, and there were many cultivators who hated them. It was better to wait until their injuries were fully recovered before going out. This way, they would be much safer. In this way, Xiao He and Xiao Bai became the mouthpiece between the four of them. It was very convenient. In addition to the doctor's treatment, Bailey Hongzhuang was also recuperating from her injuries. Under this kind of quiet recuperation, her recovery speed could be said to be extremely fast. After another 7 days, Bailey Hongzhuang's injuries had completely recovered. Ever since she had broken through to the Purple Realm, her body's recovery ability had become much stronger than before. If she had suffered such serious injuries in the past, she would not have been able to recover in less than a month. Now, the time had been reduced by half. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua saw that Bailey Hongzhuang did not show any signs of leaving the room, the two of them had a certain judgment in their hearts. However, they did not choose to expose it. In the end, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were also victims of this matter. From the beginning to the end, the ones who had harmed them were other cultivators. The conflict was not started by the four of them at all. However, the result was somewhat unexpected. The group of disciples who had originally thought that they would win without a doubt were now either dead or injured. The cultivators who had survived all experienced a drop in their cultivation bases. On the contrary, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were not too affected. Although the injury was very serious, it was gradually recovering. Moreover, it did not leave any sequelae. Other than a delay of some time, there were no other losses. Regarding this, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua could only sigh that the other cultivators reaped what they sowed. If they did not covet other people's things, they would not have fallen to such a state. On this day, Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the house after her injuries were completely healed. The moment Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door, many eyes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Ever since the battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had taken place, many cultivators who had gone out for training had returned one after another. Naturally, they were the first to know about such explosive news. Immediately, they were filled with curiosity towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two new cultivators. They were just cultivators who had just arrived at Penglai Island not long ago. However, they were able to turn the entire outer palace upside down. This was something that had never happened before. Even some of the cultivators in the inner palace had never caused such a big commotion when they were in the outer palace. More than 200 people besieged 4 people. In the end, the result was a crushing defeat. It was really inconceivable. Regarding this, some cultivators could not help but secretly rejoice. They only felt that they were extremely lucky. Fortunately, they had been training outside before. If they were also in the outer palace, they would definitely not sit idly by after knowing about this news. Once they joined in, the result would definitely not be much better than those fellows whose strength had regressed. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.